This is another episode. The title of this, it was the second choice in that poll that I had a couple of weeks ago. And I think by the time that I was recording the previous video, actually the second and the first choice were exactly the same percentage. So I decided to go with this: when and where to publish your first paper. This is very much relevant for MSc students as well as PhD students. In some cases we ask for MSc students to publish their thesis, but it's much more common in Asia, for instance, and in countries where the masters are longer than a year. Publishing a paper can be an intimidating task. It is not as easy as many people think. At the beginning, at least, it takes some effort in order to organize everything, put everything in place, and actually hit that first button. So the very first thing that I would like to discuss is the duration of the paper. So I cannot really make any comments with regards to how long it will take you to develop the research. It depends whether you're working alone or in a group, whether you're doing experimental work, small scale, large scale experimental, or you're doing computational work. The duration of the work will vary a lot, but what I can comment is how long it will take you most probably to publish that paper. The norm is about 6 to 8 months. So this is how long it will take you to publish a paper, meaning from the time that you press the button for the submission to the time that the paper is out there published and people have access to it. Again, this is very much discipline specific, so in some cases the papers are published much sooner, in other cases much longer. So in engineering, where I am, it takes about 6 to 8 months to publish a paper. Now, because of the fact that nowadays we have a lot of different journals out there, many kind of companies, some of them that are paid, some of them are unpaid, so you may find opportunities to publish papers in a much shorter time. The same applies when there are special issues, even from those journals that originally take a lot of time to publish. A special issue has got a specific deadline, you submit your paper by that deadline, and then most probably everything will process quite quickly. But we will discuss in a minute what's happening with the paid and unpaid papers, and I'll tell you what's my opinion as well. Coming back to the duration of the paper, I think that by the time that you press the button, usually takes a month to couple of months to get your first review back. And of course, the editor is handling all the reviews all together, so you will get 2 to 3, sometimes 4 reviews from the reviewers, which most probably they will be quite lengthy. They will give you about a couple of months until you respond to those comments. Of course, you have to make the so-called responses to reviewers document or a rebuttal and respond to each comment one by one in a very detailed. It often happens that papers that go through another review and maybe another review and maybe another review. So in that case, most probably we're looking at something about a year to publish a paper. So by the time that you hit the first submission button to the publication point. The last thing, when the paper goes through all the reviews and the reviewers are happy with the comments that you've made and the changes on the paper, is that the editorial team of the journal is taking over the paper and they're drafting it, they're formatting it to the right style, and then they send it back to you for doing a proofreading, which again may take a few days, and after that the paper should be published online for everyone to read. Now, where do we start with papers? So the very first thing is that of course you need to identify which is the journal that you want to go for. Once you identify the journal, then you need to go on the website and search for templates. So it may be the case that there's a template and you download that and then you start working on that paper. I strongly recommend you to work on that template in order to fix all the images and the writing, the tables in the right format from the beginning, and not to waste your time making a completely different size of pictures with different fonts and different table styles. Once you get on the website and you start the submission, the very first thing that you will have to choose is the type of the paper. So there are research papers, there are review papers, and there are technical papers or technical notes sometimes. There are some more of them, but let's focus on these 3 because they are the most common. So let's start with the last one. Technical paper is usually a shorter paper that you have done a very specific study, and usually the impact of the paper is to add something to the industry and the practice that you're working on. Technical paper can be a report of some experiments or maybe a follow-up paper of something else where you add more knowledge to it. Usually it's not really scientific, but it provides a good set of data for people to use. Review papers are usually quite lengthy, so you do a very thorough, very comprehensive literature review where you have hundreds maybe of references at the end, and you're trying to find everything that has happened in that very niche area and how the work was evolved from year to year. And most probably you're doing that because you want to highlight what are the missing points, what are the gaps in knowledge, what this area has gone through and what is missing. In many other cases, review papers are there in order to synchronize all the research, bring it all together, clarify the terminology, and make sure that everything is up to the speed. So it helps you to move on with your research, but also helps a lot of other researchers. Quick comment here, review papers usually are not used for accrediting or valuing your research, because there are not research papers at the end of the day. However, review papers, they bring you to the frontiers of that research, people who are reading your work and how you actually processed all this work out there. If you have proposed something, they may take it in consideration because they know that you have read a lot and you know about that research. So try when you make a review paper to be as niche as possible. Don't make it too extensive, don't make it too broad, because in that way you are actually missing the point of having a review paper and you're just gathering a lot of research altogether. And the third type is, of course, research papers. This is a proper scientific research paper where we're expecting that it will have a scientific contribution to that particular area. So you are advancing the research and you're bringing to the light new findings. Another topic I would like to discuss is paid and unpaid journals and what's happening with them. But before I go to them, let's discuss the difference between journals and conferences. So the main difference between a journal and a conference paper is that the journal is peer-reviewed properly, whereas the conference papers most probably will be from the scientific committee of that conference. And because we know that, at least in engineering, the value of the conference papers is not as high as it is in a journal paper, and therefore the review is not as detailed as it is for the journal paper. So a conference paper is about 5 to 8, 9 pages max, which means that most probably you will not be able to include so much information in any way, so you cannot be criticized too much. On the contrary, the journal paper can be a standalone work, you can include a lot of things, you can even have an appendix at the end, so it can be really lengthy, really comprehensive, and therefore it counts much more than a conference paper. Let me though say that there are disciplines in which conference papers are more important than journals, if not they're at equal level, but in engineering as a whole, a conference paper is not as significant as a journal paper is. In the past, conference papers, they did not even get a DOI, a digital object identifier, which means that people could not really track those conference papers unless they know the title or they go to the web page where they were presented. Even a few years ago, most of the conferences, they were just giving the hard copy of the proceedings, which means that only the delegates who attended the conference had an access to those papers. Then later we got like to CDs and USBs, and there was like a sort of a digital format of that paper, but yet it's not really trackable and traceable. More lately, a lot of conferences, what they do is that they select the best papers of the conference and they then send them to a journal or a special issue of the journal where they give them the DOI and they are fully trackable online. In some cases, they may also ask you to add more information, so make it a little bit more advanced, a little bit more of a journal type, and then it's published on the journal's webpage. So in my opinion, if you want really that research that you're publishing in a conference paper to be open access and a lot of people that are reading it, and you want to give it a bit more like validity, if I can say that, then you better send it to a conference that it's leading to a special issue, or at the beginning is advertising itself as having a special issue in particular for that. Of course, let me say that nowadays there are many repositories out there, repositories at the universities where you can publish your paper open access, or other online repositories such as ResearchGate where you can publish your work. Let's now discuss about the paid and unpaid journals and the different options that you've got. First of all, let me say that this is my personal opinion, so don't take it for granted. To begin with, we have the paid journals. The paid journals are a bit more later addition because there are now more organizations that they want to process these papers and expedite the whole process. So in fact, you're paying for their domain, for their services, for handling the papers, for sending them to reviewers, for then processing them, for giving you a format and formatting it themselves. So you pay that service yourself as the author of the paper. So you pay for the paper to be published. It doesn't mean that you pay for publish a paper that should not be published, is not good to be published. You're paying for the services that these companies offer in order to make it a publishable paper. Now, the good thing about paid journals is that the person who's looking for that paper to read it doesn't have to pay any fee. The industry that most probably will not pay any subscriptions, they will still have access to that paper. The problem is that there is a bit of a misconception here that those paid journals are a bit easier, and that's about the truth, to be honest. After all, these are organizations that they need to survive, and I'm not really saying that they will accept rubbish papers, but they're a bit more keen for getting the paper published. And there is a little bit of an issue though, that at the moment there are so many organizations and there are only a few of them that they're very legitimate. So if you want your paper to be in the journal that has got an impact factor and is recognized by most of the research machines and is Scopus based, so then you need to do very good research to see where exactly you will publish it for the paid journals. So I think the backlog of work is back to you, where you should do the research to find out which one is the most suitable for your case. Not to mention that there are some paid journals that they don't really have any impact factor and they are not really gonna get any. Now, on the other hand, we have the open access journals. These journals, they also have two different options. One is the green open access and the other is the gold open access. So the green open access means that you're just submitting your paper, it goes through the review, and once it's getting published, it will be available for whoever is actually having a subscription to that journal. So maybe universities will have a subscription to the entire, like Elsevier for instance, or they will have subscription to specific journals. If you have submitted a paper and you've published the paper in one of them, then people who have access to Elsevier, they will be able to download it. The others will have to pay a fee to get the paper, and that fee is usually about $20 to $50. It's not going to the authors, let me clarify that. It's not coming to you, it goes to the journal. There is also the option of the gold open access, and this is when the authors, they pay an extra fee, which is quite a lot, in order to publish it open access to everyone. So it becomes like the paid journals in a sense, but all that is happening after the paper is published, and in fact, where you decide whether you want to actually make it gold open access or keep it as green open access. So the fees are quite expensive, as I said, it's about $1,500 to $2,500, and that usually comes out from your research budget, where you pay for that paper to be open access. A lot of organizations, when you apply for grants, they will give you some extra money for that in particular. Now, the last thing I would like to discuss is the different versions of your paper. Before you actually reach at the submission stage, what you can do is that you can work on your preprint. So the preprint is the paper that you have until your actual manuscript is accepted. So anything from the time that you're still working on it, or by the time that you've made the submission is under review, that is still a preprint. So what you can do with it? So why you want to have a preprint? Mainly for three reasons. One is to get the feedback from whoever is reading it, if you're lucky enough to get some reads on your preprint. The second reason is because you can disseminate it and you can promote the research you're doing in any way. As we said before, it can take several months until your paper is getting published. While all that is happening, your preprint is still there and is available for people to read it. And of course, because you only upload it in your website or in databases like Academia Edu or ResearchGate, most people will have access to read it. The paper can attract citations as early as possible, and of course you can add it on your CV if you're applying for a job or something. And the third reason that you want to do that is because you're putting a stamp that you have done it at that time. So it's more like dated record which stays online, and people can see that maybe a year or a year and a half before you actually published the paper, you had done the work, here is the data, and this is when we published it. So nobody can actually claim that you copied the research from somewhere else, as long as you have a dated record that says that that was your research at that very moment. Side note, do not just make a preprint which is a draft of the manuscript and doesn't make sense. Make a final kind of version of your manuscript with all the data, and that should be a good preprint to move on. Now, when it comes to accepted manuscripts, most of the journals, they do allow you to submit and share the accepted manuscript in other sort of engines like the ones we've mentioned before. Before it actually goes through the formatting process and the proofreading, you will be able to present your paper, almost the final version of the paper, to your audience. Just check the policies of every journal because they may differ a little bit and they may allow you to do so in different ways, so bear in mind of that. There are also journals that don't allow you to do that, even if it has been accepted, even if the actual paper has been published, your, say, university repository will be embargoed for presenting that paper for about a year. Of course, once the paper is published, it will get, as we said before, the DOI, which is a permanent kind of URL, is a permanent address where people can track this paper, and then most of the websites will be updated with that DOI number, and that stays forever. Along with that, there are a few websites like GitHub, which allows you to upload your preprint and get a DOI. So I hope you guys found that video useful. Here you can find another video with how to write a good paper.